It's the amazing Rico Brogna podcast with your host, Evan Roberts.
Welcome to the Rico Brogna. We've had a lot of these Ricos. You know, say what you want about this offseason. Is it good? Is it bad? Do you hate it? Do you love it? We have had a lot of news. It's been a very newsy offseason between losing guys and now acquiring guys. This is episode 624. The New York Mets have finally acquired Luis Robert Jr. There are moves that you see coming, and there are moves that slap you across the face because you don't see coming. As much as I endorse the Mets going after Bo Bichette after they lost out on Kyle Tucker, I don't think any of us saw it coming. It was a legitimate surprise that the Mets acquired Bo Bichette. The acquisition of Luis Robert Jr. late on a Tuesday night was like this long-ass inevitable march to something that just always made sense. And we've had a lot of debates here on the Rico about Luis Robert Jr. I've been pro-trading for him, especially last year, much more than this season, but I've been pro-acquiring him. And on late Tuesday night, we got word that the Mets have acquired Luis Robert Jr. from the Chicago White Sox. We will analyze it. We will break it down. We'll also get into the induction of Carlos Beltran, who is officially now a Hall of Famer after getting the enough votes to get in with that announcement also coming on Tuesday night. Let's start, though, obviously, with the Robert Jr. trade and what they gave up, because I think over the last year when we've talked about Luis, we've always talked about, well, what's the price? What's it going to take? And one thing I asked gently from Steve Cohen, because this is a Cohen decision more than a Stearns decision, is give up less and pay more. Luis Robert Jr. is due $20 million in 2026, which I get, considering his offensive production over the last 2 years, is an overpay. And then there's a team option for him in 2027. And one of the reports we had read for months is that there was a haggling between Chicago and everybody else in terms of how much money are you going to pick up and what that turns into prospect-wise. Well, we have a big market owner, and I don't love giving up prospects. I don't want to give up a lot. So pay the salary, take the financial risk that's attached to Robert Jr., and give up as little as possible. If you go back to the trade deadline last year, the guy that was rumored mostly in a trade like this was Mark Vientos. And I remember eventually at the trade deadline saying, screw it, I'll make the trade. And my thought was, even though Vientos still has this huge potential, which we've already seen, kind of similarly to Robert Jr., in that Vientos had this great year in 24, Robert Jr. had this great year in 23. They're both young, they're right-hand hitters, they strike out a million times. There's still a lot of potential. I was willing to make the move because of the positional need, because of the defense, because of the fit. And a lot of you guys out there disagreed. They end up not having to give up Mark Vientos. They end up giving up a prospect in Truman Pauly, who knows? They just drafted him. He went to Harvard. He's a smart guy. No idea if he ever gets to the major leagues. He's not a top 30 prospect, so we can't lose sleep over it. And then they give up Luisangel Acuna. And I like Luisangel Acuna. I thought he had a chance to have a pivotal role on this team in 2026, but the pivotal role I saw for him, and I thought his value from even a year ago, was that super utility player, as someone who, with the Manfred man rule, would come in as a deluxe pinch runner in the 10th inning of a game, as a guy that can play all over the diamond, and the way this team is constituted, play a lot more outfield, even though he's a converted outfielder. But I never saw what my old friend Tommy Lugauer saw, because we argued about this a year ago. He saw a star in him. I remember that debate that we had. And look, he could still become a star. I wish him nothing but the best. No issue with Luisangel Acuna. I didn't see a star. I saw a valuable role player. And if that's the piece that you have to give up for a guy who has at one time been a star, who at least has the star potential more than just its potential, but we actually saw it for a season in the major leagues, to me, it's worth it. In a perfect world, I'm never giving anything up. You know, in a perfect world, Luisangel Acuna is still on this team. And yeah, he plays a little center field. He's a pinch runner off the bench, and we'll see. But in the world of trades, you eventually have to give something up. And when I take a step back and I look at what they gave up for the flaws of Robert Jr. and the upside of Robert Jr., which we'll get into, I think this is the cost of doing business. And I think most people out there would agree that this is easier to give up than Mark Vientos. It's easier because we've seen the upside of Mark Vientos. We've seen what he can do. And that was a borderline all-star player in 2024 once he took that starting third base job. We saw his potential. And there's still a possibility Mark Vientos is going to get that shot on this team. Right now, he's the DH, unless things change, which we'll also get into. So I think they gave up less than what I was even willing to give up last year at the trade deadline in Mark Vientos. Is there a risk that with opportunity in Chicago, Acuna becomes a good major leaguer? Of course. I mean, yes. And the White Sox are also facing the risk that Luis Robert Jr. turns himself back into the guy he was in 2023. So I start with the cost, and I say, again, you got to give up something to get something. I'm okay with what they gave up. Now let's get to Robert Jr., a guy we've talked a lot about here on the Rico. A year ago, I was hot to trot for him. This year, it was more, okay, I'll take the risk. So I've always been on the Robert Jr. train if you're a longtime Rico listener, but I'm not going to lie to you, like my excitement level right now is not through the roof. And if it was last year, it would have been through the roof. And it probably would have been attached to Garrett Crochet, which I guess would have put it more through the roof. So here's the way I look at Robert Jr. If we can accept that what they gave up is a no biggie in Luisangel Acuna. They're paying $20 million for a guy who I know plays elite level defense in center field. And the Mets have not had a lot of that. I mean, Tyrone Taylor plays good defense, and so when he was out there, he played really good defense for the Mets last year. But let's be honest about Tyrone Taylor. He is a fourth or fifth outfielder. So even when he's playing elite level defense and you're okay with it, there was never a high return on his offense. And despite the defense he played, the Mets still moved Jeff McNeil to center field. They still traded for Cedric Mullins. Brandon Nimmo, when he was in center field, was okay. I thought he turned himself into a better center fielder. Luis Robert Jr., and I'm trying to think back to the center fielders we had, is probably the best everyday center fielder we've had since Juan Lagares. Juan was great out there. And if you want to go beyond that, you obviously go to Carlos Beltran. Congratulations, Hall of Fame. So the worst case scenario with Robert Jr. is the Mets are paying a lot of money for a really good defensive center fielder. Obviously, the other risk is his health because he's missed a bunch of games over the last two seasons. Scott Boras, who represents Luis Robert Jr., was talking him up. I forget if it was the winter meetings or the GM meetings, but this was the one thing I took from Scott that I was like, oh, okay, I'll pause on this, is that Robert Jr. is working out every single day at the Boras facility in California or Florida, one of those states, and that he's putting the work in. And Boras actually compared Robert Jr. in terms of becoming a healthier player and a more reliable player to a young Brandon Nimmo, which stuck with me because Brandon Nimmo had a tough time staying healthy early in his career. We may forget that because he became so reliable. So I hold out hope because none of us know that that aspect of Robert Jr. will change, that he could just stay healthy and just stay on the field. And if he does just stay on the field, at the bare minimum, the Mets have vastly improved themselves defensively in center field. The bottom on this is they have a right-handed hitter who hits left-handed pitching, which the numbers show you not only throughout his career, but even last year, in which was considered obviously a down season for him. I mean, the last two seasons have been down seasons for him. But last year, against left-handed pitching in a down year, he hit .258 with an .842 OPS. He has a career .872 OPS against left-handed pitching. So, again, this is bare minimum stuff because I'm hoping for more. What we know, if we're going to keep the bar low, is he's an A-plus defender and he mashes left-handed pitching, or at least hits left-handed pitching considerably well. The other thing that I was open to last year, excited about last year, I feel the same way this year with less confidence because when you have two bad years in a row, you can't just, no big deal, it'll be fine. But I hold out hope that this is a guy, and we've seen so many of these throughout Major League Baseball, they just need a change of scenery. And they need to be in a better locker room. And one thing we've heard about this offseason from the reputations of the guys they've added, Marcus Semien, one of the hardest working guys in baseball, Jorge Polanco has a sterling reputation, Bo Bichette, they all bust their ass. And Juan Soto, say whatever you want about Juan Soto, and I heard this in his time with the Yankees, he is like, works at his craft like no other, to the point where every meal is like pre-planned. He doesn't go out. Like, it's always about baseball. And you would hope that Robert Jr. in that locker room, looking at the hardworking nature of a Simeon and a Soto, follows suit. And it changes him, especially knowing you're young, bro. If you have a monster year and a monster year next year, you hit free agency before you're 30. And as we've talked about here on the Rico, and certainly Scott Boras knows this, there's not a lot of great free agents. You have a chance with 2 big years in New York to re-enter free agency in 2 years, not even enter free agency because you haven't been there, and do really well. I mean, honestly. So whether it's the motivation of big financial gains in 2 years, or it's just the motivation of really being in a pennant race or the hope of being in a pennant race, I think he's got like the signs of he needs a change of scenery kind of guy, which is why I was intrigued by him at a low cost, because really the cost is money. And Steve Cohen is willing to spend $20 million on Luis Robert. He's giving him the money. The prospect haul that they gave up is not enormous. And so really the risk that you have is you're paying the guy $20 million. And look, $20 million for a glove-first, light-hitting outfielder, sure, that's an overpay. If Luis Robert Jr. matches his overall numbers from last season, which here they are, by the way, in case you're curious. And it's funny, his 24 and his 25, the 2 down years in a row that he had, they're almost identical except one major difference, which I'll get to in a few short minutes. Let me just give you his overall numbers, and then I'll tell you a huge difference that has to give you at least a level of optimism. 24, he hits 224. 25, he hits 223. So the batting average, exactly the same. He played 100 games in 24. He played 110 games in 25. So a little bit healthier, but not by much. 10 more games. 14 home runs in 24. 14 home runs in 25. So exact same amount of home runs. The OPS, 657 in 24, 661 in 25. I mean, identical. So the average, the OPS, the home runs, the RBIs were significantly up, which again, a lot of that is circumstance, but nevertheless, 35 RBIs in 24, 53 RBIs in 25. And the stolen bases were up last year, too. He went from 23 in 24 to 33 in 25. And that's a really big number for a guy that only played 110 games. And for a guy that never got on base. Think about that for a second. You steal 33 bases and you're on base 29% of the time and you only play 110 games. It's not exactly a lot of opportunities to go out and steal a bag. So clearly that potential, if he can improve those numbers, I mean, he could steal 50 bases. I don't think that's crazy. So that's another aspect of his game. But the stat that's so different from 24 to 25 that jumped out at me when kind of analyzing the last 2 years that he had, which are terrible. I mean, I'm not sugarcoating those numbers, though. Those are bad. And if he does that again, we'll be disappointed. It'll be a gross overpay at $20 million a year. It'll be better defense, and that's fine. We'll like the better defense. But yeah, our expectations are going to be a hell of a lot more than the numbers he put up last year and in 2024. But listen to this. This jumped out at me. In 2024, Luis Robert Jr. struck out an absurd 33% of the time. Context, the league average is 22%. So he was striking out well above the league average. In 2025, his strikeout percentage went down to 26%. Still above the league average, still high, but down 7%. I mean, that is a huge decrease. So he put the bat on the ball a lot more in 25 than 24. It didn't result in different performance. It didn't result in different stats, but just something worth thinking about. And then the other one, which honestly jumps out at me more than even the strikeouts, because I accept he's going to strike out a lot. And we'll be okay with that if he gets 30 home runs. I'll be more okay with that because of the nature of this lineup and how it's changed from last year. But his walk percentage, again, the league average is 8.5%. So you walk 8.5% of the time, you're doing it basically at a league average. Last year, or I should say in 2024, he did it at 6.6%, which is 2 percentage points lower than the league average. Last year, a career high 9.3% above the league average. So last year, again, take it for what it's worth, what you want to use. And for anyone out there who's old school and says, these new age stats, they're not really new age stats. Like, all I'm saying, like I'd say this to my dad or I'd say it to Joe, all I'm saying is Luis Robert Jr. struck out a lot less last year and he walked a lot more. I think the percentage is a good way to look at it because years vary in terms of how many opportunities you get. So the sheer number of strikeouts could be misleading. So it's not a new age stat. It's merely just explaining that one aspect of Robert Jr.'s game that really changed last year is he struck out less and he walked more. Does that continue in 2026? And does that continue and also lead to a difference in results? Because the results weren't any different. Now, they may give you reason to believe a breakout is coming and reason to believe that he's trending in the right direction, but it didn't result in different stats, as we just pointed out. The other slightly positive thing I could take out of Roberts here last year is that he trended in the right direction late in the year. If you look at the numbers that he put up in the final month before he got hurt and missed the rest of the season, he was actually relatively productive. Like in his last 30 games, he hit 240 with an 820 OPS, which is significantly better than the numbers of the full season. Is there something to that? Does it mean he figured something out? I don't know. I mean, the reality is with Luis Robert Jr., and this is for anyone who's negative about it or positive about it, he's got to go out and do it. And we could sit here and analyze these numbers all day, and we will, and break it down and think if this was worth it or not, and does this make this team better, blah, blah, blah. How do you feel about the offseason? Like every other person, you got to go out and do it. The question you have to ask yourself in the middle of January when they make this trade is this worth it? Is the $20 million risk, and that's all it is, because there's a team option on him in 27. So if he's a disaster, if he's horrible, if he can't stay healthy, if he's bad in the locker room, if whatever diagnosis you come up with doesn't work, you pay $2 million, he goes away. If it works, he's back for another year on what could be, if he's good, a team-friendly contract. I take you back to 2023. This is the season everyone's going to cite because it's the only full season this kid has played in his major league career. Whether it was the pandemic of 2020, not his fault, or it was just missing significant amount of times in 21, 22, 24, and 25, the only year in his major league career in which he was healthy was an amazing year. He got MVP votes. He was an all-star. He had a 5 WAR. He played 145 games, hit 38 home runs, drove in 80 runs, had an 857 OPS, hit 264. That season is what we're going to look at and say, can he be that? If he's that, then, I mean, the Mets have a chance to be a lot better than maybe a lot of us think. Or you already think they're going to be good. They could be even better. That is not going to be my expectation going into 2026. I think my expectation, first of all, is to stay healthy. Like, can you break through and actually stay on the field? Can being at the Scott Boras camp help you to the point where you're actually there and you're actually healthy? Can you play a very, very sturdy center field? And then offensively, can you hit me 240? Can you hit me 25 home runs? Can you steal me 35 bases? If you put up numbers like that to go along with Gold Glove caliber defense, that is tremendous. Because the other thing we have to factor in, and I've done a lot of this over the last few weeks and months with the changes that the Mets offseason has occurred. You know, losing Alonso, trading Brandon Nimmo, trading Jeff McNeil, the replacements. And it's not a perfect science to say, okay, this replaces that and that replaces this, because there's so many other factors that are going to decide how good this Met lineup is. Like, what's Francisco Alvarez? What is Brett Beatty, assuming he's on the team? Things of that nature. But one aspect that Luis Robert Jr. does by accident, even if he puts up the same putrid numbers as last year, is he vastly improves center field. Let me give you the Mets center field numbers last year. Oh, this is going to make you feel really good. And I'm just talking about, you played center field, I don't care who you were, whether it was Tyrone Taylor or Cedric Mullins or Jeff McNeil, Here are the overall center field numbers from the New York Mets in 2025. And close your eyes, unless you're driving, and tell me if you think Luis Robert Jr. can replace these numbers. Hoff, this is going to make you sick, but these are real numbers. These are the Mets center field numbers from 2025. Team batting average, 27th in Major League Baseball, 210. 210. 210. The OPS, 27th in baseball at 598. The only position group the Mets had that was below 600. The only position group they had that was below 650 was center field. 598. And then the totality of home runs, 7. So even if Luis Robert Jr. puts up the exact same numbers as he put up last year, and that's only in 110 games, it blows away the putrid, disgusting numbers they got out of center field. And if you want to go back a year earlier, because I'll even include 2024, they were 19th in batting average at 230. They were 18th in OPS at 661. And they were 14th in home runs with 18. So not as bad, not good, obviously, below league average. But last year, those numbers are mind-boggling. And then you throw in the fact that the defense was not great. Like Jeff McNeil's out there and the defense is below average. Tyrone Taylor's out there and it's fine. Cedric Mullins is out there and he's average at best. And even in the brief period of time we witnessed Jose Siri, he's supposed to be a good defender. He was not. So the bar that Robert Jr. is trying to pass is so low. So when we play this game of, hey, are the Mets better? You know, when we take Bichette and Polanco and Simeon and we compare it to the guys that they're replacing, if you do that in center field, and obviously Tyrone Taylor is still on the team in a very different role, they have gotten significantly better in center field. And that's with acquiring someone who was horrible last year. But his horribleness last year, even in 110 games, far superior to what the Mets got in center field. All right, let's get to what's on everyone's mind. Cody. Now, at the rate of this offseason, I'm fully aware that if you're listening to this Rico Brogna hours after we recorded it or sometime Wednesday night or Thursday morning, there's always that chance that Cody Bellinger has made a decision. My gut on what this does for the Mets and Cody Bellinger is I think the Mets still have an offer out for him. It's a short-term high AV offer, and I think if Cody Bellinger accepts it, great. It's a good problem to have. Bellinger could play a lot of left. He could play a lot of first. Ideally now, I'd see him as a first baseman, but that's a different story. But I think this move shows you that they are not confident that Cody Bellinger is accepting the Mets offer. So I'll meet everyone in the middle. For those that still think the Mets are aggressive and they're going to get Cody Bellinger, I think it's highly unlikely. I've thought it's highly unlikely for a while now. I don't think this 1,000% eliminates them. I think if Scott Boras comes back to the Mets and says, hey, I spoke to my client that short-term high AAV offer is something we prefer, I think Steve Cohen has shown us that he'll go a little bit above when it comes to payroll to bring in a player that fits. And Cody Bellinger still fits. I mean, how he would fit is a little different. He wouldn't be the center fielder here. He could play a lot of left field, but I really would like the idea of him just being the first baseman at this point and allowing Polanco to DH and allowing Brett Beatty actually to play a lot of left field. I guess you could argue if Beatty could become a better first baseman than left fielder, maybe you flip that. But the point is you'd have options both way. And yes, the lineup would be deeper. No doubt. I am not against Cody Bellinger being a New York Met. I'm just being realistic that I interpret this as they know they're likely not getting him. They know that the offer the Yankees have on the table for Cody is not something the Mets are beating. And unlike Bo Bichette and unlike Kyle Tucker, I don't think the short-term deal really makes as much sense for Bellinger as it made for those two other guys. Those two other guys are younger. Those two other guys could have seasons that enhance their value. I don't see that happening with Bellinger. He's a good ball player, but unless he goes back to the MVP player he was in LA 7 years ago, I don't see this mega contract he's going to sign in a year or two when he's older. So I have been under the belief for a while that Bellinger is going back to the Yankees. unless another team swoops in with a long-term offer. But here's what I know. The long-term offer is not coming from the Mets. I just don't see it. So if Bellinger shocks us by accepting a short-term offer, yes, I guess it's still in the realm of possibilities that Cody Bellinger picks the New York Mets. But what I would tell the Rico audience right now, my fellow Met fan or the Yankee voyeuristic fan or the White Sox fan, curious what we're saying about Robert Jr., I would say it's very unlikely Cody Bellinger is a New York Met. And so where does that leave the position group? Right now, and I don't love Polanco at first base. I have said that all offseason. I liked the addition of Polanco, but I envision him more as a DH / guy that can play everywhere. Let's say there is an injury to Marcus Semien. Polanco plays second base. Let's say there now is an injury to Bo Bichette. Polanco could play third base. And a little bit of first base. I'm not ruling that out entirely, but the idea of Polanco pulling a Todd Zeile and just becoming the everyday first baseman has never been my first choice. With that said, I am looking at the nature of this roster. I am looking at the nature of this offseason. I am now reacting to what's here and what I think is going to happen next. I would still love in a fantasy world to get a real first baseman, which Cody Bellinger is, even though he hasn't played a lot in a while. Christian Walker is, but I think that's highly unlikely with the right-handed bats the Mets have added. So with the way they're constituted, Jorge Polanco's the first baseman. I just have to grin and bear it. And I am now very intrigued by Brett Baty being the left fielder. And Brett Baty learning left field, relearning left field. It's a position he played years ago, not a lot. And I have a little bit more confidence in Baty playing left field because of what I have in Luis Robert Jr., because of what I have in Tyrone Taylor basically being a caddy defensively late in games. So I think the makeup now of this outfield and this roster gives me the... All right, Brett. Oh, sorry. I got excited and my microphone fell. Let me fix that. All right, Brett, go play a little left field. And late in the game, if we have a lead, you're coming out of the game. Because Tyrone Taylor's role got really impacted, in my opinion, from this Robert Jr. signing or trade. Because until they acquired Robert Jr., Tyrone Taylor was going to get a chance to play every day. Now, I view Brett Baty as the guy I want to see a lot more in left field, with Carson Bench coming when he's ready, with Tyrone Taylor playing a lot of late inning defense, with Jet Williams potentially coming when he's ready. That's how I view left field. And I feel better about it, about all of those guys, because of the defense that Robert Jr. supplies. I also think this benefits Carson Bench. I think the pressure now is a little bit off Carson Bench because now they don't need him to make the opening day roster. Would we like him to make the opening day roster? Of course. He's a young player with great potential. If Carson Bench can have a big spring training and make the team, that's great. That's fantastic. That's his job to eventually win. What happens to Brett Baty? A lot of things. I think he should also learn first base. I think that should be an option. He can also DH. Right now, Mark Vientos is the DH, assuming he's still on the team by the time we get to opening day. And there's still that chance that those pieces change. We talked about Acuna a lot as a guy who could be a part of the outfield mix. He's obviously gone now, so we're not talking about him. I would like to see Baty play a ton of first base and left field in spring training. And look, the Mets need to evaluate where they think he's best. If they see him blossoming into a guy that could potentially play first base, maybe better at a higher level than they see him playing left field, or dare I say being a better defensive first baseman than Jorge Polanco, then I think that allows the game plan to change. But as of right now, the way I view this team, unless more changes are made, and it's certainly on the table. Like I said, I think it's very unlikely they end up with Cody Bellinger, but Cody Bellinger changes this entire discussion immensely if they bring him in. But I think this allows Baty to play a lot of left field, to play a little bit of first base, and we go from there. But the defense, before you jump in, Hoff, the defense still features a lot of questions at the corners, right? Right field, Soto was one of the worst last year. Left field, someone's learning it. Third base, someone's learning it. First base, someone's learning it. All true. But up the middle, I mean, it's as good maybe as anybody in baseball. I'd have to go through all the different teams, but Lindor, Gold Glove caliber. Simeon, Gold Glove caliber, and obviously Luis Robert Jr. And we'll see if Alvarez can continue his jump because he was a lot better after he was recalled from the minors. But that's where the defense and the run prevention is significantly better than last year. Major questions on the sides. Not going to deny that. But up the middle, the defense is as good as it gets.
Well, okay, so you're talking about Brett Beatty potentially being left fielder or playing some time out there. And it's going to really hinder on whether or not Juan Soto puts a lot of work into this defense. Because if Juan Soto can become a decent outfielder, like he's decent right now, but better than average outfielder in right field, that gives Luis Robert Jr. a little bit more of an easier time in center field so that he can kind of protect more left field wherever Beatty is. I mean, that's kind of what it is. For me, as watching the outfield, you can't have two terrible corner outfielders and one good center fielder. You kind of need to maximize one side a little bit more. So that's kind of where I'm concerned.
Think about this, though, with Beatty in left field. Beatty in left field may be the way things start, but not the way it ends. Like, it's almost, assuming they don't deal Brett Beatty, which they could, or deal Mark Vientos, which they could. Brett Beatty is almost holding off left field until Carson Benj is ready because they are very, very high on Benj. And by the way, I'll tell you another aspect here. If Robert Jr. falls flat on his face, he could also lose his job. I've mentioned that before. I don't care how much money he's making. If he's hitting 175 in the middle of June, like, I don't think it's a birthright for him to be the center fielder. But I think Beatty is becoming McBeatty, as the emailer said, where his role could be playing in all sorts of different places. But your concerns on defense, I think, will be fixed late in games when Tyrone Taylor, who's an elite center fielder, is playing left field. When they've got Taylor in left and Robert Jr. in center, that I think will alleviate defensive concerns. And what I read about Benj is that he was better suited in the corner outfield spot anyway, so this probably benefits him. And we'll see what kind of defender he is. So I think that'll help alleviate the issues of Brett Beatty in left, and as you mentioned, Soto in right.
Now, listen, and as far as the trade goes, I'm not really upset with this at all. I always said I don't want to give up a haul for Luis Robert Jr. I don't think Luisangel Acuna, it was a haul. I don't know this other pitcher, Truman Pauly, at all. So to me, I think it's fine. I just hope it's like the Trent Grisham of the world. Like, you're taking a risk on a guy that can put up these numbers that he's never really done before. He's only done it once. I know you laid out the walk percentage and the strikeout percentage. All that is good. I just don't want him to screw up the locker room. You get one shot at it this year, right?
I don't think he's going to screw up the locker room. I think he may not succeed the way we're all hoping, where, put him in this locker room and this is going to benefit him. So I don't think he's a hindrance to the room. I think it's more, maybe we'll all be wrong. You know, the change of scenery crowd, which is a lot of us, and it's been said for a while about him, just may not happen. Like, he just may come here and this is who he is, and he can't stay healthy and he hits 210. And that is the biggest risk to this. And by the way, if that happens, it's only a one-year deal in the Mets' eyes because they could non-exercise the player option. So it's one of those moves, I guess, similar to Grisham in that, what's the risk? I mean, the risk is Luisangel Acuna. I mean, the risk is he goes to Chicago, gets an opportunity to play, and we regret trading him away. But I don't know what his ceiling is. Like I mentioned earlier, I had that argument with Tommy on the air back in the day. He thought he was a star, and I said, no, I think he could be a valuable role player. And he can. And it would be nice to have a valuable role player. I'm not saying it's no big deal that he's gone, but I think the risk of what he turns into, to me, is not that high. We'll see, though.
Yeah, he has no position on this team right now to be playing. He's going to be a minor leaguer, if anything.
You know what his position was? And I actually had an email in the bag that I was going to go through potentially today or Friday when we do our Rico mailbags. And it was, hey, Evan, should Acuna Jr. just be a part of the competition in center field? And my thought was, why not? Like, assuming they didn't add anybody, yeah, go to spring training, see what the kid can do. Have a chance to win a job. So I think he was going to be in that possibility. And then if he didn't make it, he would be on the roster as the utility player who comes off the bench as a pinch runner and can play some defense. But that's what I think his role was. So I don't think he was going to be a minor leaguer. I think he was going to be the Manfred Man special, where he comes in the 10th inning as a pinch runner. Let's read a lot of your emails, a lot of response to Luis Robert Jr. It's obviously mixed. I'm not surprised because when I talked about him for the last 2 years, I always got a lot of pushback on him. There's a lot of mixed opinions on him. So let's start off with Dan, big contributor to the Rico, who's been very positive about this offseason. But Dan writes, this might be the first Stearns move I disagree with this offseason. I don't know why I get a bad feeling about this deal. Maybe because I was always a give Acuna a shot guy, or maybe because I feel Robert really won't make that much of an impact. I know he came on at the end of last year, and everyone keeps talking about the change of scenery, sparking him again. But sometimes guys like that lose it and are done. Not to mention the 114 games he's missed over the last year doesn't really inspire much confidence in me giving up someone with Acuna's potential, even though it was clear from the jump Stearns was never really into him. Hope I'm wrong, but this one worries me. I think where I differ is I like Acuna, and I think he had a role on this team. I don't see the potential of stardom in Acuna as high as I would see it in Robert Jr. I think if Vientos was the guy in the deal, then I would probably agree with you more, even though I admit back in July I was willing to make that deal. Mike writes, Luis, Robert? Evan, love the Rico. Appreciate your dedication and hard work. Thank you. Really not thrilled with this trade. We didn't give up much, so that's fine. Robert has been abysmal at the plate for years. Lou Bob. Is that his nickname, Lou Bob? I don't know if I like that. Lou Bob, because Robert, Bob, sure, I got it. Lou Bob's last two seasons, 657 and 661 OPS, 86 and 85 OPS plus, literally worse than 6 of Tyrone Taylor's 7 seasons. Worse than Tyrone Taylor's lifetime average numbers. That's fourth outfielder defensive replacement Tyrone Taylor. Not happy about this one, and he's in an enormous injury risk. Averages 96 games per year, played over 110 games once in his career, and our outfield depth chart is incredibly thin. Sure, he has a high ceiling, but he only hit that in one outlier season 3 years ago. Since then, his floor has been below the floor, subterranean, 10 stories underground nuclear war command bunker floor. But hey, they didn't give up much. Maybe he has a change of scenery rebound, or at this point, resurrection. And his defense is good, though his arm is worse than Tyrone Taylor's. Benj better be an absolute stud and ready ASAP. This is one heck of a disappointing pivot from losing Kyle Tucker and apparently Cody Bellinger. LFGM. P.S. I live in Seattle these days, and Jorge Polanco really should stay at DH and be very limited in the field, even at positions he knows, never mind first base. So him plenty last year. His best position is DH. I've agreed with you about that. I wanted a realer first baseman on this team. The closer we get to spring training, the less confident I am in that. The one, I don't even know if it's a defense mic on Polanco at first base, is you've never seen him play it. And neither have I. And as I pointed out a lot, that doesn't mean he's going to be good, obviously, but it also doesn't mean he's going to be bad. As we've seen two guys specifically in Bryce Harper and Wilson Contreras make the transition of first from very different positions. One was right field, one was catcher, and they've done it at a pretty high level. Adam writes, pinch runner concern. Evan, I love the trade, but who is the Mets' pinch runner now? We all remember how bad Mauricio was with the pinch runner. I think the way they're currently constituted, Tyrone Taylor can fit that role / coming in to play defense. But the pinch runner role, as valuable as it is in the man world we live in, to me is more of a luxury than a necessity. You don't have a lot of guys on your bench to begin with, so it's not something you have to have. You know what I mean? Lance writes, Stearns finally got your guy. I feel like I've been hearing about Luis Robert Jr. for a year and a half now. Never really wanted him that much. I guess it's better than nothing, but I really don't love giving up Acuna, who's faster, could probably hit for the same or better average as Robert, and he started to play the outfield all for a lot less money than Robert. Sure, he has high upside and short-term contract, but I don't know if it's really a big improvement, especially losing Acuna's speed. I do love Bichette signing on its own. Great call on that one. And it's not making up for losing Pete and Diaz. Right now, the offseason is still a D to D minus for me, and that's being nice. Do we really think Stearns is going to get a high-end pitcher still? I can see him signing Griffin Canning and just calling it a day. I think they're going to add a pitcher. I do. I think the question is, to what level? Freddie Peralta is probably, because I'm going to put Scooble to the side now because you just don't even hear rumors about it, which doesn't mean they won't trade him. Sometimes things happen without any whispers and any rumors, and then it just happens. And the Mets are still positioned, I think, well with the prospects that they have to make a trade for Tarek Skubal. So I certainly wouldn't rule it out. But Freddie Peralta realistically is out there, and that would change the dynamic of this rotation. I've made my point about you better be committed to signing him and all that, but I'm putting that aside for now, just talking about what it would do for the 26 team. It would change the rotation. It would take the pressure off Nolan McLean. It would make you look at the question marks like Senga and Minaya and say, hey, I'm relying a little bit less on them. So that is, besides Skubal, the biggest win in the short term if they trade for Freddie. I don't know what I'm willing to give up because Cliff Floyd, who I love, put out a mock trade on MLB Network, and it was too much. Like, I can't give up Jonah Tong and Brandon Sproat. I can't do it. And Jet Williams? Like, come on. I forget if that was actually the offer, but it was something expensive. The guy I am warming up to as the fallback option is Lucas Giolito because of the solidness of him. And I think if you can't get the bona fide ace, get the guy who can eat innings. Get the guy who, when you've gotten 4 straight starts of 4 innings or less, could at least go out there and eat innings for you. And I think that is something that Lucas Giolito brings. I think right now they're going to add a starting pitcher. I'm not sure which one it is. Is it Giolito? I don't think it's Framber Valdez. I've explained why many times because of the QO. Is it Freddie Peralta? Is it someone else we're not thinking of? Is it Zach Gallen? I'm not sure who it is, but I would be very surprised and disappointed, obviously, if we go into spring training, which is less than a month away, and they don't alter this rotation in some kind of way. And I'd be okay with Giolito because, look, the years and money and picks you have to give up for Framber Valdez feels very, very risky. The package you have to give up for Peralta on what could very well be a rental feels very risky. There isn't a lot of risk with Giolito. I mean, you're probably not going to have to give him a long-term deal. I'd be stunned if you did. I mean, I almost envision Giolito either taking a 1-year deal or a Montas-like contract where it's a 2-year deal with an opt-out or a 3-year deal with an opt-out after 2, something of that nature. And those are the kinds of deals that David Stearns has been willing to give. Let's get to Carlos Beltran. First of all, congratulations, Carlos Beltran. No surprise. I think you could see it with the way the vote was trending over the last couple of years. Carlos Beltran elected to the Baseball Hall of Fame, and Andrew Jones was elected to the Baseball Hall of Fame. And look, Andrew Jones, I hated as a fan, right? As a competitor, I hated him because he was so good. And because how many times did we watch Andrew Jones run down a baseball that should never have been run down and put it in his back pocket? How many times was Andrew Jones playing ridiculously shallow and would catch a little blooper that would have fallen 9 out of 10 times and then like a play later runs down a ball over his head that he has no business catching? Many will disagree with what I will say, but I've said it many times over the years. It's not new. You can give me Ken Griffey Jr. You can give me Jimmy Edmonds. I didn't see Willie Mays, okay? Didn't see him. Andrew Jones is pound for pound the greatest defensive center fielder I've ever laid eyes on. Period. So I've always thought he needs to be in the Hall of Fame. I'm not even mentioning his offense, which was more than good enough. If you're going to put Ozzie freaking Smith in the Hall of Fame on the first ballot strictly based on defense, and you're going to tell me, but it's an important position, Evan, then the best defensive center fielder for my money in my lifetime has to get in the Hall of Fame, especially when his statistics, his offensive statistics, are obviously damn good. Unlike Ozzie Smith. I don't mean to besmirch him, but come on. So I'm happy for Andrew Jones. I'm happy for baseball because I think he deserves it. The Beltran thing is so complicated for us. And here's what's complicated. I was always a Beltran guy. I still get people who tell me about the fight that Joe and I had back in the day about Beltran, that they love it. I think it's on YouTube somewhere, where we fought about Beltran early on, 2008, about the Mets and the locker room and if he was the problem and all that kind of stuff. And even though Joe has turned on Carlos to where he loves him, I mean, you ask Joe today, you call up a Saturday show, I think he's got great respect for Beltran. I think he's pissed off the Mets didn't let him manage, that he had to sit out the Hall of Fame for a year because of this cheating scandal. So Joe will absolutely tell you he's a Beltran guy now. But at the time, he represented a lot of people, and I think he represented the majority. Carlos Beltran was not loved. Carlos Beltran came here with high expectations. He had a disappointing first season in which he played through injury. He refused to come out for a curtain call on that 2-home run game in 2006, and Julio Franco was like, get out there, man. And Beltran was honest. He said, hey, if you're not my friend when things are tough, why are you my friend now? Carlos Beltran is the modern example of learning and then excelling on how to play in this town. Carlos Beltran was always underrated by most Met fans. He was underrated by Joe for a while because he was incredibly clutch. And the reason people couldn't see him as being clutch is because they could not get past one at-bat in one moment in 2006. And yes, the moment haunts me. And yes, the moment haunts you. But he was more than that. Like, in that same series against the St. Louis Cardinals, they won a game 2-0 on a 2-run home run by Carlos Beltran at Shea Stadium. Was that not clutch? A few games later, in Game 4 of the NLCS, where the Mets needed a win, they were down 2-1, and I think they were down 1-0 or 2-1 in that game, Carlos Beltran hit a game-tying home run. In a huge game down the stretch against the Chicago Cubs in one of the collapses, David Wright had this miserable strikeout with guys on base, and it felt like the Mets were collapsing more, and then Carlos Beltran came through with a walk-off hit. In Game 162, closing down Shea Stadium, Carlos Beltran hit a majestic home run that I thought was going to erase what happened in Game 7 of 06. I don't care what anybody says, and I'll argue it, and we will do a Carlos Beltran tribute coming shortly on the Rico. He was an incredibly clutch player. But people couldn't get past the moment. And the other thing people couldn't get past, and there's no denying what happened, he was a part of a very disappointing era in New York Mets history. He just was. Same with Jose Reyes. Same with Carlos Delgado. The reason David Wright escapes it is because of 2015, in my opinion. Because David Wright was also so instrumental in their run, a magical run 9 years later. And I think, and you heard it when we did the David Wright tribute a year ago, you can go back in the archives, a lot of our David Wright moments came in 2015. So unfortunately for Carlos, he is a main part of an era, not his fault, that was disappointing. Losing in the LCS to a team they were better than, collapsing in 07, collapsing in 08. And I think that's been part of the shadows Carlos Beltran has boxed. With that said, the Met cap for him in the Hall of Fame, it makes sense based on stats. It makes sense based on his career. And if that happens, he's the third Met ever to have that logo on their hat when they go to the Hall of Fame. The franchise in Tom Seaver, the modern-day franchise in Mike Piazza, and Carlos Beltran. And it's very tough to deny that kind of importance. He's going into the Mets Hall of Fame this year, and whether you like it or not, I think his number will eventually be retired. I don't think it's going to happen immediately. Tyrone Taylor's going to have to give it up at some point. But I do think if he goes in the Hall of Fame as a Met, I don't know how you don't retire his number. So congratulations to Carlos. We will do an in-depth Rico honoring his Met career. If you want to share your thoughts on Beltran and your favorite moments or negative thoughts, totally fine. You can email us, thericob@gmail.com, thericob@gmail.com. Also, your thoughts on Luis Robert Jr. We'll do a big mailbag coming up in a couple of days where we'll get all your thoughts on all these various subjects. And also, we will eventually get to putting a bow on the Edwin Diaz trade, where it ranks in Met history, and also all the player losses in the history of the Mets that affected us. Try to compare it to losing Pete Alonso and losing Edwin Diaz. We will certainly do that as this offseason slows down. But it's not slowing down. There's big news all the time. And, of course, the latest, Luis Robert Jr. is a New York Met. We appreciate you listening and downloading. Remember to subscribe to the Rico Brogna so you never miss an episode. You can check out Evan and Tiki, 10 a.m. on The Fan, and also that streams on YouTube as well. Thank you very much for hanging out with us. Another edition of Rico Brogna.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Rico Brogna podcast. It's amazing, isn't it? Make sure you download it now to keep it on you at all times.